The Holy Gospel comes from the 12th chapter of Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Well, sometimes with the stories and the parables in the Bible, you can see yourself as one of those characters. I have a story of a time that I felt like the rich fool as depicted in Jesus' parables today. I did my pastoral internship out in North Aurora, and for that year, Sean and I moved from Hyde Park out to Wheaton to shorten both of our commutes. In the suburbs, there were all these shopping centers so close to me. And that year, we subscribed to Chicago Tribune's Sunday paper. And in that Sunday paper was a large stack of shiny, glossy ads. And so I would peruse those ads, and every week I found something that I just thought I had to have, that it would fix my wardrobe problems, this one thing. Well, at that point of our life, we were also making a little bit more money because I had a stipend for internship. And so here I was, near shopping, with a little bit more money and a stack of shiny, glossy ads. Well, I started to plot and plan my week around when I would get to this store. And then I'd think about how great this item was and all the things I could wear with it. And it just kind of became this obsession. Now, most of the time, I never actually made it to the store. I never got there, but this still became consuming for me of how I'd use my time and how I was going to use my money. I just kind of turned in on myself. Me, my. Finally, I realized that this pattern had to stop, so I gave up the ads. I fasted from those shiny, glossy ads. And I could shift my focus to other things. This no longer dictated my thinking for a week. I was a much healthier way of being. To me, this feels like a modern day parable of what Jesus is talking about in the gospel today. The rich man in the parable is thinking about his crops, his barns, his grain, his good. It's me, my, I. And he turns in on himself, thinking only of himself. He never considers sharing the abundance of these crops. He never considers the needs of those in the surrounding community. And surely in a time when most people lived in poverty, there were needs in the community around him. He never considers anyone but himself and his future. And the thing I notice is that he's alone. It doesn't even talk about his family. It's just him and this abundance. And here's what also jumps out. The text says that the land produced abundantly. The abundance was a gift of the land, not from the man's work, from his toil and labor in the field. It was a gift of the land that came to him. It was God's gift. But that never dawns on him either. Martin Luther often used the phrase incurvatus in se when talking about sin, and it literally means like turning inwards. My seminary professor would talk about it as belly button gazing. We get obsessed with ourselves, our wants, our desires, our future security, and we turn further and further inward until we're looking at our own belly buttons. And thus we're missing so much. We're missing the needs around us. We're missing a sense of community. We're missing the sense of what comes to us from God as pure gift. We miss the implications of our own desires on wants, implications on our neighbors, and in this age, on the earth. As Jesus so often does, he calls us to this new orientation towards the world, to get our noses out of our belly button so we can see the needs of our neighbors, to get our noses out of our belly button so we can respond with open hands, and so that we can see that all that we have is a gift from God. Jesus is warning about all sorts of kinds of greed, and it seems that generosity is the antidote to greed, because greed turns us inward, but generosity turns us outward to our neighbor. Because when we get to our church or to the food pantry or Habitat for Humanity or Lutheran disaster response, whatever it is, we're seeing someone else's need and responding with the gifts that have been given to us. Greed can isolate us, but generosity connects us. Again, because our noses are out of our belly button and we're open to see our neighbor. We're open to see the ways we all need each other. Greed deceives us into thinking we're the self-made man or woman, that we did it all on our own without any help from anyone or from God. But when we practice generosity, it's often so grounded in an understanding that what we have comes to us first as a gift from God. That it's not ours to hold on to and hoard up and store, but it is ours to share. And when we do this, when we practice generosity, when we live into this understanding that all we have is from God, we see God as the true source of our life, of our joy, and our peace. As Jesus says in this gospel reading, life does not consist in the abundance of possession. Those things in the really shiny, glossy ads, they don't really satisfy. Not really, certainly not eternally. Jesus invites us to be rich towards God. And at that heart of that richness is to find ourselves rooted and grounded in the love of God that we know through Jesus Christ. We do that each time we come to worship, when we turn to God in prayer, when we say grace at dinner, when we do an act of service, when we share generously, when we practice thanksgiving and give thanks to God, when we gather with our faith community, and when we share in the Lord's Supper. Again and again, we come back to being rooted and grounded in God's love. Because certainly what we find is that God has been rich towards us. God has been rich towards us in sending his son Jesus to reveal God's heart in his dying and his rising. in his mercy and forgiveness, in promise and hope. Thanks be to God. Amen.